Again, welcome everybody. This is really a very exciting moment, and I just want to make sure that all of you are feeling as optimistic as I am about this being the first day, technically, of our reopening in the state of Oregon as of 12:01 a.m. this morning. So once again, good morning. I'm Andrew Hone. I'm the president and CEO of the Portland Business Alliance, Greater Portland's Chamber of Commerce, and now 2,000 member plus organization, which feels very good to say. Thank you for joining us today for our June forum. It's the sort of last of the series before we restart again in September. And it is an exciting time when we can focus on our state emerging from the closures. And while we're all thrilled about this, we need to ask the questions, what does it mean to go back into the office? And how do we, as a society, move in a very positive direction and make sure that our team members are feeling good and reinvigorated and reconnected? Everyone here at the Alliance hopes you're well and staying cool out there as we all hit record highs and we're reminded about the consequences of climate change and the impacts to our region. As Oregonians, we need to continue to also get vaccinated. So while we can celebrate today, it is still our job to get shots in arms. And we want to encourage everybody to continue the important work of following all the guidelines that continue to be in place. With the ongoing COVID-19 updates and new regulations, we continue to update our websites and be a resource to all of you. We may even imagine a day when we won't be updating this website as frequently with COVID-19 updates, but for now, we will keep doing that. Make sure to follow us on social media for updates. We are on Twitter, Instagram, and elsewhere. Of course, a recording of this presentation and links for the resources mentioned will be available on our website later today, and none of these events could be possible without the supports of our sponsors. And we have some great sponsors that I want to thank today for their ongoing support of this series. First to KeyBank, and second to the Portland Tribune. Thank you so much. And joining us today from KeyBank is Michelle Weisenbach. Michelle, also a director of the Portland Business Alliance Board. Michelle, it's great to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And good morning. I'm Michelle Weissmach. I'm the president of KeyBank here in Oregon and Southwest Washington. And thank you so much for joining us today. It is with great optimism on our state's reopening day that I do have the pleasure of welcoming you all here as we look forward to this very timely conversation we're going to hear today. After all, last June, I'm not sure that any of us would have predicted this light at the end of the tunnel that we are seeing now. Of course, we're not completely out of the woods yet, but as the vaccine rates continue to climb, we're looking forward to resuming many of the activities that we have missed over this last several months. And now we're in that phase where we're really considering, what does it mean to return to the workplace? To once again share that water cooler chatter, to make lunchtime plans with your coworkers, to consider collaborating around a conference room table and not a video screen, or perhaps a combination of both. We might even be able to soon give a coworker, a high five or a pat on the back for a job well done. Of course, any reopening plans are tempered by current conditions and good sense, and it's not likely to be business as usual for some time, and workplaces and norms will need to continue to adapt to new realities. But as we look at the silver linings amid the pandemic, one of the things that we learned is how quickly we adapted to new ways of working, and I know it will be exciting to apply those learnings as we return into the office. And as leaders, we need to refuse to be mired in what have we always done and really be looking forward to what do we need to do today. I know we all have great interest in hearing from our panel today as they share ideas and best practices for the return to office and making it as safe and inclusive as it can be. Thank you so much to the Portland Business Alliance for assembling this fantastic panel. Really looking forward to the conversation today. And back to you, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and KeyBank, and really the entire team at KeyBank has just been a great partner of ours and really appreciate all that you do for our community. And I would also like to thank the Portland Tribune And really, for all of you who are familiar with the news business and what's going on, it has been a remarkable year for media, and our colleagues at the Trib have been just doing a fantastic job in providing local coverage and media for all of us. And with us today is Dana Haynes, the editor-in-chief. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm speaking today for Mark Garber, our publisher and president, who had a conflict and can't be with us. Our company hasn't quite figured out our own reopening plans. And to be honest, we're kind of making it up as we go along. I've been editing newspapers in Oregon for a quarter century, and like many of you, the pandemic told me that there's a whole lot about my own job, my own crew, my own business that I thought I knew and maybe didn't. Do we have to operate out of a newsroom? Well, we haven't for 15 months, and our crew is more productive today than it's ever been. On the other hand, we'll have interns, both high school and college students, joining us soon. They'd get cheated out of the experience that they don't get to interact with reporters and photographers like Jim Red and Jaime Valdez. So like many of you, we're going to slowly figure out what works. But more important than that, more important than anything, we have been traumatized, all of us. Everyone has. Post-traumatic stress is a real thing and will be for the months and years to come. How do we, as employers and managers, prepare for that? Take these two examples from psychiatrist Dr. Maya Lopez, whom we recently interviewed. Nobody talked about the 1917 Spanish flu pandemic. We were never taught about it. And as a nation, we had no collective knowledge of how bad this pandemic would be. But after Manhattan was attacked on 9/11, everybody there talked about it and wrote about it and named streets after victims and crafted art pieces. And as a result, the zeitgeist in Manhattan post-attack rebounded really well. How we, as business people and as supervisors, handle the post-traumatic stress of this pandemic will help set a course for our employees, for our company, and for the city that we love. So today's topic could not be more important. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. For the Portland Tribune and for the Pamplin Media Group, thank you. Back to you, Andrew.
Clearly, we've captured the right element of topic, because I think you hear both from our sponsors how important this really is and how important this conversation is. And boy, Dana, you are absolutely right. I think all of us need to take a moment here, recollect ourselves as a society, and start to heal on so many levels. So I really appreciate you calling that out. And mental health, clearly a key element of this. And how do we as employers play our role? So thank you to both our series sponsored for your continued support, KeyBank and the Trib. And I'd also like today to thank our events sponsor, Kaiser Permanente. As more individuals are getting vaccinated, many businesses have entered or are planning to re-enter into their office buildings and public-facing spaces. It is important for your business to be planful and prepared. I like that term, planful. Kaiser Permanente cares about your employees and your business, as well as the safety of our community. And they have put together a playbook on returning to work and planning for the next normal, whatever that may be. But they would like to share that with you. And Kaiser Permanente's mission is to provide high quality, affordable healthcare offerings, offering industry-leading technology, advances, and state-of-the-art care delivery. They want you and your employees to be safe and be prepared as you re-enter your workspace. Thank you to Kaiser for your support, and to the healthcare workers, thank you for your continued fight against this pandemic. I would now like to welcome the chair of the Portland Business Alliance and president of business for the Portland Timbers and Thorns, Mike Golub, for his very last day as chair of the Portland Business Alliance. We have just been really grateful for your service, Mike. You're just a great all-around person, and we are just thrilled that you're able to join us today on this, your last day of your term. Mike, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for the kind words, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us for the June forum. What does it look like to go back to our office? I'm actually joining you today from my office here at Providence Park, and within the next 30 or 40 minutes, our governor will be officially announcing from Providence Park our reopening as a state. And so today's discussion couldn't be more timely or apropos. Just a few ground rules for everybody. We'll be taking questions through the Q&A tool, which you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom. So please submit your questions, submit your organization and your name, obviously, and we'll take those after the initial panel discussion. Feel free, however, to put any comments in the chat function on an ongoing basis. And we've got an all-star lineup, which you'll hear from, and an all-star moderator. And it's my pleasure to welcome your moderator, Morgan Romero from KGW-TV. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much, Mike, and good morning to everyone. I'm so excited about this conversation. We've been covering it a lot at KGW, so I'm excited to learn from these panelists, and I want to introduce you to the rest of today's panel. Please welcome Kimberly Branham, Executive Director with Prosper Portland, Andrew Schrock, Co-Managing Partner with Baron Liebman, Cyrilda Summers-McGee, Founder and CEO at Workplace Change, and Pat Welch, Co-Founder and CEO with Welch. Welcome, everyone. First, we're going to start with brief introductions and have all the panelists tell us what they do with their respective companies. Kimberly, let's begin with you.
Good morning. I'm Kimberly Branham. I'm the Executive Director of Prosper Portland, and we are the City of Portland's Economic Development Agency. Really glad to be here for this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Kimberly. And Andrew?
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Andrew Schrock. I'm co-managing partner at Baron Liebman, which is a 25-attorney labor, employment, and benefits law firm in downtown Portland. In addition to helping run the firm, I specialize in employment law advice and litigation, which basically I refer to as drama in the workplace. But these last 16 months has involved a lot of advice to businesses about how to comply with state and federal COVID laws and safely operate.
Okay, great, Andrew. And Cyrilda?
Hi, everyone. I'm Cyrilda Summers-McGee, founder, CEO of Workplace Change. Workplace Change is a fully integrated human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion firm located in Portland. And you'll hear how we talk about people and culture in just a bit. Happy to be here today.
Happy to have you. Thank you. And finally, Pat.
Muted. I'm Pat Welch. I'm co-founder and CEO of Welch, which is a full-service contract, temporary, direct hire, executive search, and HR consulting company. I've been involved in every aspect of our business for the last 35 years, but most recently, currently, my major focus is strategic planning, culture setting, philanthropy, community outreach, and building a management team that will ensure our 35-year legacy continues for the next generation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, Mike was right. All-star lineup. So of course, the conversation now, the time is here. It comes in a very timely day to talk about going back to the office for so many who have been able to work remote throughout the pandemic. So first question for the panelists, what is the first step businesses should take when getting ready to welcome employees back to the office? Andrew, we're going to start with you.
Thanks. So I guess what I would say is bear in mind that even with today being the day when mask protocols and physical distancing falls off of sort of the list of expectations, that there are a lot of things that employers still need to do to make sure that they're providing a safe workplace. So things like the exposure risk assessment, the infection control plan, some required posters, a number of things Oregon OSHA put out during the pandemic are actually still rules that employers have to follow in terms of safely reopening. So bear in mind, especially if you're in certain specialized settings like healthcare, public transportation, or correctional facilities, there are a number of COVID precautions that are still required. So I'm planning to paste into the chat a link to Oregon OSHA's page that has a number of those links, but just bear in mind that it's important for you as an employer to legally follow the steps to provide a safe workplace before the employees come back on site. And the more you communicate on the front end about the steps you're taking and the efforts you're making, the more comfortable your workforce will be in returning to work when you ask them to.
Great perspective. And kind of in a different note, Cyrilda, what would your answer be to that?
Well, everything Andrew said, and we haven't been in these spaces for some of us for over a year. How is that refrigerator looking, right? Like people, I was riding past Metro up Grand or MLK, and I saw desks turned on their side, right? Like people had come in and taken chairs out. They had, taken screens out. What is the current state of your space, right? Are the plants deceased in there, right? Have you, is the cleaning company rehired? Have you gone and groomed the exterior? Have you power washed that joker in a while? I just feel like, what's the smell like even, right? There are things that you should be thinking about when you're coming back into the workspace. And I know folks are trying to figure out like who comes back or who doesn't come back, or, will it be hybrid? And we'll talk about that in just a bit. But there are some logistical components that you should consider. Are you going to require people to return their chairs and their desks and their screens? Are you going to require people to return because you purchased for their homes a sit-stand desk? Like, what is the response to that? What are the policies for that? And make sure, and I'll say this 1,000,001 times, right? because HR, people culture, you have to think about equity. Make sure you're not allowing some people to keep those items and other people to require, bring those items back, right? So that's what I would contribute to this.
Yeah, that's great perspective. I did leave my lunchbox in the fridge for a solid 13 months, so guilty. Pat, what about you?
Well, the first thing I would say is make no assumptions of what your staff wants following the pandemic. We surveyed our employees about their readiness to return to the office. And we asked them about health and safety concerns, feelings about working from home, what their perception of an ideal working environment was going to be, what were the obstacles to returning to the workforce. And what we found surprised us. Fully 75% of our staff are comfortable and eager to return to the office. However, 0% are looking forward to coming back 5 full days a week. So we opted to do a soft opening July 6th and let people return on a voluntary basis so that we can further evaluate what works best for everyone, for the staff and the company. And we've had about 6 or 7 employees throughout the pandemic who have been going into the office socially distanced and masked during the whole pandemic, just because that was best for them. I personally was at the office 3 times this year, but others were going in. We'll review then once we do the soft opening and we figure out what's best. We're going to review it in office, we're going to review in office, fully remote, or a hybrid model for each position. And we'll come up with a plan after looking at what the evidence is through the summer for a full opening when schools return in September, and hopefully. So that's our plan.
That sounds great. Obviously you touched on this. I think a lot of people were in shock when the world was flipped upside down. Everything changed. Life, work changed overnight back in March of 2020. Hard to believe it was that long ago. So how can businesses help their employees transition back to an in-person schedule? Serilda, we're going to start with you since you're kind of that people person like Pat.
Right on. Well, again, all we do all day long are listening to, kind of what the challenges are between management and the workforce across the board, my entire team. And the first step from my perspective is be flexible, right? Like flexibility is king or queen or, top right now. And a lot of managers, I'm experiencing, a lot of leaders, CEOs are very eager, many are very eager to get folks to come back into the office, business as usual, back to normal by, whatever standard of normal that we are trying to get back to. And I don't think that's the future state, right? To Pat's point, she had some statistics about her particular team, but that's the current state of the world, generally speaking. Folks are not eager to be 5 days, butts in seats in the office constantly. And I also need for just folks to think about, for those leaders, and there are many leaders out there who want folks in the office 8 to 5, 50 hours a week. Ask yourself, why do you want that to even be the case, right? Is it a requirement that be the case? And then how can you encourage a hybrid model? Like what kind of technology and support and equipment do you need? There are things you should consider. People have families, people have aging parents. A lot of families actually merged during COVID so that people could help with the kids, right? People could make some snacks and some meals because Lord have mercy, I've got a 6-year-old and 11-year-old and it was tough, okay? Grandma and granddad just came through. And what does going back into the workplace full-time look like for that new dynamic that folks are a part of? There are pets that we should take into consideration and folks who contracted COVID during this time who are still not at 100%. Right, so flexibility is going to be what is critically important during this time. The leadership teams need to come together and talk about what are the requirements, absolute must happen requirements for bringing people back into the office from a culture preservation standpoint, but also thinking about just the 22nd century is not one where the entire workforce is there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. or later. All right, so that's what I would say.
Great points. No, you're exactly right. And Kimberly, you bring a really interesting perspective too, kind of from the public sector. Talk a little bit about what your answer would be to that question.
Well, I agree completely with what Serilda said. So I'll just add one consideration that's prevalent not only in the public sector, but in other industries as well, is that while many of us have had the privilege of being able to work from home, that's not the case for everyone. So about 33% of employees across the country have been able to work completely from home. Another 23 or so % were hybrid, but a full 44% were never worked from home. So manual work, manufacturing, healthcare, social work, hospitality. And if you have a company where you have employees who have been working, in the office or in the field for the entirety, and you have folks who have been working at home, that can create some challenges across your culture. So I think that's something that on the government side, where you've had, all of our public safety folks have been on the ground full speed. They've never worked harder in their lives. You have people who've been working really hard to keep parks clean. For them, we definitely don't want to talk about returning to work. Certainly that's, they've been out in the field. So I think figuring out how we can support folks who have enjoyed working from home, while also acknowledging that there have been different experiences. And that's true for people, not only because of the kinds of jobs that they've had, but also, as Rilda mentioned, if you are a working parent, you still don't have full childcare. So I think figuring out how you meet people where they are and really go slow. And I think what we're trying to do as an organization, and I think across our sector, is take a learning posture. I think if anything we learned in COVID, it's nothing is forever. So how can we take it a couple months at a time and really learn as we go, and have a focus on flexibility, but also on really meeting people where they are.
That's great. Thank you. Pat, you talked about your plans. You touched on how you're going to transition people back. So what exactly would that look like? How can you make it easier for employees?
Well, I think we can help the transition back by talking about and understanding the issues and concerns that our staff have. In this pandemic year, people have reevaluated everything from daycare to commuting to paying for parking to working in their pajamas. We can explore that some folks are as productive or more productive working from home, actually, but work out on the natural, but they're missing out on the natural collaboration and personal connection of working side by side with their team. And we can let our employees know that we're looking at their individual circumstances as well as what's right for the company as a whole, and maintaining our coworker connections and making sure we don't lose a beat in servicing our clients and our candidates in the process. So therefore, a slow roll back feels most considerate to all involved. And we left the office very abruptly, but we owe it to everyone to make a more gentle return.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you. And Andrew, how can businesses help employees transition back?
Absolutely. Just to add sort of an additional layer, I think, to the points that Cyrilda was making. I mean, I think all employers are trying to strike a balance in terms of how can I accommodate, how can I make this easy for my employees to transition back? And it's not really going to be easy for anybody if we're being honest with ourselves. The one thing I wanted to mention is there are some legal obligations that, even with us slowly reopening, remain in place. And the biggest ones are, there's both a federal law, the FFCRA, and as well as changes to the Oregon Family Leave Act that were made during the pandemic, but made permanently, that say if schools are closed for pandemic-related reasons, then parents, childcare providers are allowed to take protected medical leave to care for their child. And so, I think it's important for employers to bear in mind, I think Kim made this point, not all things are open 100% just because we're slowly coming out of this. And so employers should bear in mind that there may be legal obligations to accommodate the need to be out for periods of time, even if it's for childcare coverage, because the pandemic continues. And one other point on this, I think the key here is expectations, as many people have said, being clear about what you expect from your workers, providing a timeline and runway for them to plan in terms of physically being back in the city or in the office. And then making sure people know who the points of contact are if you have questions or need accommodations or have a concern about safety or how people are behaving in the workplace.
Such great perspective too. Thank you, Andrew. Moving on, all of our panelists are from all different industries. So when it comes to each of your industries, how are you seeing specific sectors go back to work? Are they doing that hybrid approach, the mix of in-person and remote work? Are they doing staggered, so different days throughout the week? Or have some even decided that remote work is best? We will begin with Kimberly.
So like Pat, Prosper Portland is going to have a soft reopening of our Central City office location starting July 6th. It's on an invitation basis. And then we'll be waiting until this fall when schools are fully reopened and there are more childcare options to implement a hybrid system, and to expect staff to be present at some capacity. We're still going to work to find out what that right balance is, but I think it'll be focused on finding opportunities for collaboration and engaging with community members, but also continuing to allow for the flexibility that people have appreciated. When you take a broader look across industries, we're seeing, I think, as Shrilda mentioned, that hybrid is the largest trend. It's interesting from my perspective to see financial services and law offices more likely to be fully in the office or hybrid, with a lot of tech and sort of STEM companies more likely to be offering remote. But the one last thing I'll note is just on the labor side, there's such a strong demand for remote work, and that this is really impacting service type jobs. So I think we all know that it's really challenging right now for retail and restaurant businesses to find employees. And yet if you looked at LinkedIn, the highest demand, like in terms of the highest types of business or types of jobs that people are applying for, are lower barrier, less senior jobs. So people are basically moving from needing to work in retail or restaurants to those kinds of data entry or business development opportunities where you can work from home. So I think long-term, finding ways to make your work hybrid is going to be a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Pat, in your industry, what are you seeing with specific sectors?
Well, since we work across all industries, we're seeing a real mix with essential workers who are in-house, as they have been throughout the pandemic. Some companies are still requiring all employees to return to the office. For example, in those industries like healthcare, construction, manufacturing, property management, there's more requirement for in-house. But for the most part, we're seeing the hybrid model being established where it can be established. I think that turnover and retention will be an issue if employers are too rigid in any direction, be it stay home or return to office. The thing that surprised me most is how booming the employment market is currently. I did not expect that. I was expecting something that looked more like 2009 and other recessions that I've lived through. The top candidates are in big demand right now and have multiple opportunities that were not previously available to them. And they have tasted options that were not before conceivable to them. So they're able to choose from those options with tempting raises from competitive companies. So I say, don't be rigid, be flexible, be open, cherish those workers that you have.
Great advice. Andrew, this question for you too, being in the field of law, what we're hearing from companies too, different law firms across the city, is that they are trying to go back full time because it's a little bit trickier for your line of work.
That's absolutely right. And there has been a range. I mean, I think what you've heard anecdotally from this group rings true in a more generalized way in terms of a lot of people moving to a softer opening, you're welcome to come back type style thing over these next couple days or week, and really targeting fall as the kind of butt in the seat point in time for most of the workforce. I think also to pick up on a pattern that's already been mentioned, most seem to be looking at a hybrid, and the most common versions I see of that are either you can pick a day or 2 days a week where you won't be in, but it has to be the same days each week so it's predictable, or else you're on the labor and employment team, so everyone in the labor and employment team needs to be here on Tuesdays and Thursdays for team meetings, but other teams don't need to be here on those days. But I will say, to the point made before, that more and more I am seeing some organizations that are sort of viewing it as a selling point to say you could be as remote as you want to be, in terms of kind of whether it's a quality of life type dynamic, sort of offering up, you don't need to come in if that's something that differentiates us from some of the competing offers you might be receiving as a candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. Competitive. Cyrilda, what about in your world?
Andrew took all my points, and just like I'm judging him right now, right? He didn't know I was going to say those things. He took all the things I was going to say. So this is what I'll say. I'm going to merge Pat's point and Andrew's point together, okay? So Pat was talking about the market that's available right now. It is a hot market, right? It is, you know, you can find a job doing anything you want, anywhere you want in the world right now, especially if you're a historically underrepresented person who's highly skilled and highly decorated. Lots of education, person of color, woman in tech, you can go anywhere in the world. So the question becomes, why would they choose your company, right? That's the piece. So what's happening is that a lot of people are making these. I was driving downtown just this morning, and someone had a hiring bonus for a chef at a hotel, $1,000, right? We'll give you $1,000 today to just come in here and make some steaks for us, please. It is crazy out there. So be cautious, right? I know that people are trying to incentivize, you know, hiring people into the organization. You can go anywhere, you can do anything. But we have seen this happen before. Like I'm fancying myself into like a historian. World War II, and the group has heard me say this before, when the men went off to the war and the labor industry was just like, there was a dearth of talent. They pursued women to come into the workforce. They offered daycare in ways they never had before. They offered like these very just kind of warm, welcoming environments where they were cold and they were disinterested in the needs of female talent at all, but they needed them, right? And when men came back from the war, you know what they did with those women? They took away the daycare, they took away all the fringe benefits, they took away everything that made it a reasonable, welcoming environment for those women. And they kicked them out and gave the jobs to someone else. Tread lightly, gang. If you're incentivizing people to come into your organization right now, you need to keep those things intact. If you are trying to find historically underrepresented people now, and you're trying to figure out how to, you know, compel them to come to your organization for whatever reason, you need to consider how do you ingrain those into the policies and practices throughout your organization, right? So I you know, yes, hybrid is king, is hot right now. And people are coming up with these things that Andrew highlighted, which were brilliant, and everybody's doing. He's spot on, absolutely right. But there's these cultural nuances that we have to, you know, keep our finger on the pulse of. How do you create community? How do you manage the workforce? How do you engage with them? How do you keep people feeling seen and heard and valued consistently? How do you not just default to who you're most naturally, you know, inclined to communicate with, icing out the others? Like, you have to keep those things in mind in this hybrid manner, in this hybrid system as well. And I hope people do.
Yeah, I mean, our world has changed, right? It's got to be sustainable over the long term. So all really good points. Thank you guys for touching on that. I'm sure you could talk about it for a long time too, but we have to move on to the next question, which is a little bit, it's interesting because some small businesses, those maybe that are attending this, don't have an established HR person, HR department. So curious what resources are out there for those businesses so that they can make the best choice for their employees, because they don't have this big corporation or this company giving them direction and telling them what to do. Pat, we'll start with you.
Well, I think people have many options to deal with the HR complexities surrounding the work and the aftermath of the pandemic. For example, Welch has had an HR consulting division since 2012, and it's always been able to act as an adjunct to companies' HR function, to their firms as an HR function. We have four full-time JDs on staff, as well as a robust bench who've been with us for many years, and we have also 4 JDs on staff who are qualified to advise companies by staying abreast of all the new mandates for compliance and help create and update employee handbooks and give practical counseling to thousands of different scenarios that we've dealt with over the years. We don't practice law, however, and for unique legal issues, we refer to our client and trusted partners over at Baron Liebman, actually. Yay. We also offer free webinars on all HR-related matters weekly to both employers and job seekers. And there are many other good HR consulting companies out there, including Cyrilda's company. So there are options to help people that don't have HR functions internally.
Perfect segue, because obviously we want to ask that question of Andrew, what resources are out there for those companies?
I'm going to give away 2 very valuable secrets. The first one is Bully Technical Assistance. The Bureau of Labor and Industries has a designated line where if you have a question about what the law requires of you, you can call and ask. I don't recommend disclosing who you're calling on behalf of, just in case you're disclosing that you're doing something wrong. But they are usually pretty willing to give just sort of advice. The only other things I would throw in the mix, the other one that is a little bit of a secret sauce is you're welcome to join our firm's mailing email list, even if you're not a client, as long as you're not a competitor. So if you're interested in getting occasional e-alerts when the law changes, we try to keep our clients and contacts updated. So you can always feel free to reach out to me if you want to join the list. The last thing I would throw out there is local HR groups. The Portland Human Resources Management Association is the big one locally. That's a place where even if you're not an HR person, you can go to their programming, you can interact with others, and they have some resources as well. So those are the ones I throw in the mix. And I will paste the phone number for BOLI technical assistance in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. And Cyrilda, coming from your company being workplace change, what resources are out there if people want to maybe change their workplace environment moving forward?
Absolutely. You don't have to have an HR professional full-time in order to be able to get good people and culture advice. There are many firms that are out there. Workplace change exists, right? People and culture with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion integrated. But what I tell people is that there's so many resources out there. If you sit down and you read through kind of what the best practices are, and then you call, 30 minutes, a 1 hour long consultation that's hourly, right? It may only cost you about $250, $350 to get up to speed on kind of what your next steps may be. But what I would tell folks is don't wait until there's a problem, right? Like a lot of companies that we work with, they call us and we become ER docs, right? But we want to be like baby wellness doctors, right? Like, how much did my baby grow versus like, she's hemorrhaging, right? Like there's just so much extreme stuff happening in the workplace, and you wait until it's super hot, it's super contentious. Folks are trying to get an attorney. They're calling Andrew, like, I'm suing him. We don't have to wait until that happens, gang. We can actually just be thoughtful. Who do we want to be? How do we want to treat our workforce, right? If one person is complaining, how many people need to complain before it's actually something you should be responsive to? Because by the time they come to us and we're at this critical place, you all knew it was a problem 9 months before that ever, came to be. So why aren't you acting now to get some advice and counsel before it becomes really disruptive? That's what I would say.
So glad this is being recorded. People can go back and watch it, take notes later. Kimberly, would love to hear your perspective for those companies that don't have established HR departments. What resources are out there?
Well, in addition to what the other panelists have recommended, all fantastic recommendations. If you are a small business and if you, if resources are tight for you, I would encourage you to look at Prosper Portland's Inclusive Business Resource Network. We have 16 technical assistance providers and the ability to help with free legal advice through the Small Business Legal Council. They'd oftentimes have online forums and you can have a business advisor help you with developing policies. So certainly there are a range of opportunities to be able to support businesses. Particularly, I'm thinking about micro businesses who are, very small and who might have, for whom $200 might just be a barrier.
Great, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of our time. So an all-encompassing question, what other advice do you all have, all of our panelists have, for those attending this? And what would your call to action be? I think maybe best start with Andrew.
Sure, and I'll be a little less legal about this one. And this is kind of in part informed by personal experience. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is to make it fun and welcoming for people to come back. Group lunches, coffee carts, happy hours, small gestures go a long way right now. For a lot of people, the best part about being back in the office is the opportunity to interact with coworkers. So make time as a manager or leader to interact with coworkers and make opportunities for those coworkers to interact with each other if they want to or volunteer to. And I think the more you presented yourself as a culture-based organization before, the more you need to be focused on what that means post-pandemic in terms of in-person and events, interactions, and be strategic about that.
Great advice. Pat, what other advice do you want to share, and what's your call to action for these businesses?
Well, I would absolutely amplify what Andrew just said. My best advice when employers ask me how they can compel people to come back to the office, I say, don't compel them, make your office a compelling place where that they want to return to. My experience is that our employees can be just as productive working from home, but I've never had an employee want to work for me because of our mutual goal of productivity. We want people to experience the joy of work-life integration, which we have spent a lot of years trying to develop. The camaraderie we've worked hard to foster amongst our staff creates bonding and collaboration, and they're rooting for each other and watching others grow and be successful. And this inspires them. So they feel a purpose in what the work that we do in terms of finding careers for people and watching them develop and grow. So we get to share that mutual purpose. It's magnified when we're part of a whole. We bring our dogs to work. We have a kids room where the little ones can come when school is having a teacher and service day. The teens can come and do their homework after school and visit their parents. You can bring your mother. I've got a 93-year-old mother who comes to work and visits with my staff. And you can bring your baby to work for the first 6 months in our office. So we, those things that you're talking about, Andrew, the complimentary salad bars, the pizza parties, we have a week of spring break themed activities, allowing people to have flexibility to go to their kids' sporting events during the day or go to a school play. We encourage 12 days of working volunteer in the community and sharing your experiences and the organizations that you're passionate about with your coworkers. So we believe employers will do best by demonstrating the flexibility to show their people they want to balance productivity with connection and purpose. And we want to remind them, if they've forgotten while they've been home all this time, why they liked working for us in the first place, and show your employees what's special about you and your culture. So that's the most important thing I could say right now.
Love that. Love that. Hearing flexibility and culture throughout this conversation. That's great. Kimberly, what about you?
Well, what we're talking about today will influence not only the future of each of our organizations, but it will have an impact on the future of our city. And we know that there are a number of small businesses who have relied on all of us for catering and for lunches and for gifts, who've been hugely impacted in the last 15 months. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to create a resource guide, or to look at places like Venture Portland and Travel Portland, or Shop Small PDX, or Be Here for Portland, and create resource guides for your staff and really encourage them to go out for lunch when they come back, if they're coming back in a hybrid model. And just make sure that we are supporting businesses so that we can continue to have really vibrant commercial districts across our city, and show some of these businesses that we've been missing some love. It's been a tough year.
That is great, tangible advice. Serilda, finally you, what's some advice you have or a call to action for these businesses?
I'm going to ask the group a question. I'm going somewhere. I'm going to land this plane, I promise you, fast. And here's my question. Have you ever worked in a toxic work environment? How did it make you feel, right? It made you become a different human being, a different parent, a different partner, a different brother, sister. It made you different. You can put all of the snack bars you want in an organization. You can give as much flexibility as you think you would want personally in an organization. But if that environment is toxic, if it is riddled with microaggressions, if there is low transparency, low trust, which is happening, gang, like I said, we're like ER doctors in this joint, okay? It is happening. That in and of itself is going to seep away from, erode from all of the genius that can come from bringing people together in person or virtually. And I want people to walk away saying, yes, it's all kind of fuzzy and unclear, but one thing that is certain and has been consistently certain, managers and leaders have to think about adapting, adjusting how it is they lead this workforce, because today's workforce is vocal. They know what they want. They are fearless. They vote with their feet, and I am here for it, right? So you have to be prepared to be responsive to that workforce, to not micromanage that workforce, to not stop them from being able to be creative and having ingenuity and just vibing on a totally different wavelength and frequency. That is the future, right? So my parting words is, evolve our leadership practices and styles beyond just work from home and hybrid models, right? Like, let's become better leaders of other human beings, because the workforce is demanding it.
So powerful. Great way to end it. Fantastic panel, you guys. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining this. I hope you learned a lot. It is now time to hand it back over to Andrew.
Thank you so much. And actually, Maureen, we've got a number of questions here in a few more minutes. I think hopefully we can cruise through some of these because I know we have some very eager participants that want to get some answers. And first, I just want to appreciate this panel too. This is something that's impacting every workplace right now. And I think it was Pat that used a word earlier, this word compel. And if you go back to March of last year, we were compelled to stay home. We are not compelled right now. We are open to options, and how you navigate through this is really complex, but it's okay to take our time. So I think I appreciate the sentiments of this panel, because it's time to do this right versus what we had to do at the closure, which was to just do it, not to borrow the phrase of an apparel company locally here. So let me get into some just really tactical questions. I see one coming in from Amanda Shaver, who's over at PGE, great member of the Alliance. Just want to thank you for your question. Has a really interesting, this is maybe a legal technical one about when do we expect OSHA to update all their guidance on the face masks and distancing? Because I think that's the one where Mike Al pointed out, we have the governor announcing these reopening plans today, but when do the rules get adjusted? How do we process that? And when can we expect those timelines and those updates to occur?
I'm happy to start on that one. I think the short answer is that OSHA is currently planning to today release a temporary rule that immediately sort of withdraws the face covering and the physical distancing aspects of all the COVID guidelines. And what I mentioned at the front end is there is no intention at this time to get rid of a number of the other requirements on workplaces in terms of having people back in the office. So bear in mind that just because we're dropping those two most visible aspects of the pandemic doesn't mean that now we can just do what we were doing before. I don't think Oregon OSHA is going to be quick to get rid of those remaining items, because we've got the Delta variant hanging out there. There's been a real concern about, minimizing death. And the way to do that is not necessarily to relieve all restrictions once it starts to look better. So I suspect that it's going to be somewhat of a slow roll beyond the face covering and physical distancing requirements, because in general, it's going to be a best practice for employers to look at the safety, infection control policies, ventilation practices of the workspace, regardless of whether or not there's a raging pandemic at that very moment.
Thank you for that. And this next question, this is from Gina Stark, and I'm going to open it up to everybody, including Morgan. I want you to reflect on this question too, because I think it's something that we haven't really gotten into here, but it's a really important citywide, region-wide question. This comes from Gina Stark over at Sussman Shank, and she's asking this question: what about people and employees who are asking about the state of the city, right? What the conditions, these are not what's happening inside your office, but more kind of what's going on around the city. Are you all hearing, and I know you are, Morgan, we've talked about this, how are people reacting to the state of the city as it relates to coming back into the office? I'm really interested in hearing every single one, including your response to that.
I can kick it off. Like Andrew said, I've interviewed Andrew on a couple occasions and other major employers around town, smaller employers. I think, from an employer's perspective, from a company owner's perspective, they are putting pressure on the city to clean it up, to get things together in order to make it attractive for companies to come back and actually want to bring their employees back to the office, be it 5 days a week, 2 days a week. And I think people are becoming more confident in my conversations with folks as a reporter this past month versus the past 15 months. People are now becoming more confident in the state of the city, in its safety, and its cleanliness, and its appearance. Tourism is picking up. I'm currently in Idaho right now. I'm hearing from friends and family who are saying, okay, I think I'm ready to get back to Portland from images I've seen. And that is key, as I believe Kimberly touched on, that is key in reviving Portland. If we want to bring Portland back and we want to make this city as phenomenal as it once was, it's critical to have these big employers, small employers, the fabric of Portland back in the offices, back downtown, reviving downtown, eating at local restaurants, shopping at local stores. And so I do think people are becoming more and more confident. And I think part of that is being driven by just their love for Portland.
Let's transition that to you, Kimberly. You know, you touched on this about the small businesses, that ecosystem that thrives on employees. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I completely agree with Morgan. I think that there is a renewed confidence. I think there's been really concerted effort between the private sector and nonprofit organizations and public leadership to, just last weekend, even in the heat, I think there were 1,500 people who came out to clean up the city together. And I think we are seeing a lot of events that are going to be happening. Prosper Portland is happy to be co-sponsoring a number of those with the idea of bringing people back in. And I think to kind of mirror what we were talking about in terms of taking a flexible approach, I think we're hoping to just bring people back, not because they have to come back, but because they want to come back, because there are so many fantastic things that are going to be able to happen safely because we're going to be outside. And so, I do encourage you, and I'll put it in the chat, encourage you to look at Here for Portland and Travel Portland and Prosper Portland's websites for events. And, as you're thinking about bringing employees back, taking them out to lunch and just showing, our office is in Old Town Chinatown. It's been really impacted. But when our employees who've come back in have had a chance to do that, they're generally very pleasantly surprised. So not to say that everything is perfect, but I think we are in a positive cycle at this point.
Cyrilda, why don't we toss this to you now?
Yeah. I have a mailbox at the downtown. It's like right off of over the bridge. The big post office is being shut down. I need to find a new post office. But I go down there nearly every day. We do one thing in our house. At the end of the day, after school, after work, we get in the car, we go to the post office, we go to grandma's house every single day. That's what we do. And so I have seen the cleanup, and the fact that this last month is definitely, there's been a shift downtown. Not Northeast Portland, which is where my babies live, which is where they'll be walking to school, which is where, I'm seeing mounds of trash that clearly is not on anyone's horizon and on their minds. Marine Drive is epic. Have you gone on Marine Drive? Okay. Blows your mind when you see it. So yes, downtown clean and safe. I know PBA focuses on that, but come on, most of the small, especially minority-owned businesses are not downtown or Northeast Portland, and it is mayhem still over here on this side of town. So where is the advocacy? Where is the presence? Where is the energy to get this side of town taken care of? I'm very passionate about this.
I can hear it. And I agree, this is a citywide issue. And also it impacts all of our businesses, this and every organization in the city. It is absolutely a citywide, it's a regional issue too. So this is the critical conversation. Now we have two also office tenants here as well, and Pat Welch and Andrew Spaka. Just curious to hear from you.
I'm usually considered a plucky optimist. And so I'm glad to hear optimism from Morgan and from Kimberly here, but I have to say, I think it's a chicken or egg. I believe us coming back and doing the things that we need to do in terms of supporting small businesses and hospitality, et cetera, restaurants is going to help. And I'm delighted to do that and want to be a part of that. And I've seen some of the cleanup downtown, but I have to agree with Cyrilda. I'm kind of appalled at the garbage that I see driving around the city on the east side and the west side. We just lost the press that goes out nationally about us. The fact that they just canceled the LPGA at Columbia Edgewater and moved it because of the camps and the garbage there. That is horrible press for Oregon. And as a recruitment company has always had the easiest time selling Portland to someone coming in. Well, who wouldn't want to live in Portland? Who wouldn't want to be here with all the natural resources we have and the community and the hundreds of the best restaurants in the world? Who wouldn't want to be here? Well, recruiting is much more challenging these days to bring people into town, and recruiting companies to come into town with issues that we have with our tax base in Multnomah County, et cetera, that's a problem. And you add garbage to it. I mean, I've had a company I've worked in downtown Portland. I had a company there for, well, my company 35 years and worked there 45 years. And I would never want to live anywhere else or work anywhere else but downtown Portland. But lately, I have to say, it's tough. It's tough. And I hope it will come back. I'm rooting for it too. I want to do anything we can to make that happen. But I think it's going to take a little time. I mean, I hope tourism comes back, but people build conventions out 5 years before they pick convention sites. Are people picking Portland now? I don't know, but it's sad to me. And I come from Detroit. So I watched the implosion of a great city. I don't want to see that happen here. I chose Portland to raise my children here and my grandchildren. And I want to see it be the great city that I moved to 45 years
And I'm
ago.
from Michigan, and I was just in Detroit on Saturday. And you know what? At 7 o'clock in the morning, when I went to get coffee, there were no homelessness people, no homelessness on the streets, and there was zero trash, and it was beautiful and pristine. By the way, I think that there's always been beauty and pristine in Michigan, and it's one of my favorite places in the world, and my family's still there. But what I will say is that it's been very disappointing to see the current state of the city of Portland. It's unbelievable.
I don't understand the inability to pick up the garbage. That's the biggest thing for me. I mean, I understand the homeless situation is very challenging and very difficult to resolve, but garbage everywhere? I mean, don't we have people can pick up garbage on the highway? I'm just, don't get me started.
I should note, before Andrew answers this too, I should know my optimism is mostly focused on downtown Portland. And I'm glad Cyrilda mentioned it is, yeah, the outside areas for sure. You know, as a reporter, I cover this every day. And, you know, just to clarify, it's that renewed, I think, confidence from these companies in downtown Portland. But
Right.
certainly these issues are there and the boarded up windows are still there. But again, it's on everybody to, like you said, chicken or egg, what comes first?
Exactly.
Let's hear how Andrew can take us home, and then we'll have to move into the wrap up, because I think these are incredible comments here. So Andrew, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll focus on the positive too, which is, I mean, as someone who came in, I was home for a few months, but I came in once or twice a week for a fair amount during the pandemic. It is drastically better today than it was a month or 5 months ago. Is it much worse than it was before the pandemic? Absolutely. You know, and is it a huge mix of factors that are very dangerous and difficult to oversimplify? Absolutely as well. I think, you know, we've shown that we're going to invest from a tax perspective in working on the homelessness issue. And I hope that seeing those funds come in and get spent will help make a difference. But I agree. I mean, there's a safety aspect. There is a damage to property aspect. There is a trash aspect that you know, I think we all need to be brainstorming about. I love that Solve is kind of encouraging organizations to kind of team up and have it be a team building effort. Hopefully we can figure out other ways to make it sort of a bonding, cultural, let's work on this together type approach to making it better.
It's a good punctuation point. I know we still have some unanswered questions, but I can tell you, for the folks that have posited those into the Q&A, we'll make sure to get those out to our panelists, and who'd be appropriate to respond, we'll get back to you with those answers as well. And just, I think it's also notable that while the budgets and all the things we've been talking about, the city and the county, and with Here Together funding coming in for the homelessness crisis that we're all in, those take effect really in effect tomorrow. And so what I think, you know, we're all standing on the cusp here of wondering when will we start to transition into the effective implementation of these critical services. And some of them are just basic services that we're talking about. And I think that all the commitments that have been made really prioritize the basic services that we need to get back to, which I think has been totally appropriately called out. And I think it's that time. And I also share optimism while just making sure that we all are doing this together. And that's the other piece. This is a public-private partnership to get this city and this region back on track that I know we all love. So with that, I just want to provide my absolute gratitude to our moderator and this panel, who has taught me a great deal today. And I just want to thank each and every year. This is a really, really healthy dialogue, and just thank you. Let's all give them a virtual round of applause for all of you in the audience. Thanks for joining us today, making this possible. This is the last of our series. And I hope everybody takes time this summer to just relax and heal and get back to enjoying the things that we've been bereft of for this last year and a half, which is human connectivity. And that's the quintessential thing that makes us different. So with that, I'll just say thank you all and have an incredible summer and a good time, and take care of one another.